Few figures in Hollywood command the kind of reverence, awe and fascination that Jack Nicholson does. For decades, he was the embodiment of cinematic greatness. A man who could slip seamlessly into roles that ranged from devilish villains to vulnerable anti-heroes, from eccentric loners to powerful authority figures. His signature grin, sharp wit, and mischievous eyes became symbols of American cinema itself. Nicholson wasn't just an actor, he was a cultural force, the very definition of Hollywood royalty. Today, at 88 years old, the world looks back on Nicholson's life and career with a mixture of admiration and melancholy. Admiration because of the unparalleled body of work he has given us, from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to The Shining to A Few Good Men. Melancholy because time, as it always does, has changed him. Once a constant fixture courtside at Los Angeles Lakers games, once the life of every Hollywood party, Nicholson has retreated from the spotlight in recent years, choosing instead the quiet of his Los Angeles home. Rumors of declining health and memory loss have circulated, leaving fans heartbroken as they face the reality of an aging icon. But Nicholson's story is not just about decline. It is about triumph, resilience, artistry, and a life fully lived. To understand what happened to Jack Nicholson at 88, we must trace his journey from a complicated childhood in New Jersey to the glitz of Hollywood, from his meteoric rise in the 1960s to his graceful yet bittersweet retreat from the public eye. Jack Nicholson's story begins on April 22, 1937, in Neptune City, New Jersey. Yet even his birth carried a veil of mystery that would not be uncovered until decades later. Nicholson grew up believing that his mother, June, was his older sister, and that his grandmother, Ethel, was his mother. The truth, that June was in fact his real mother, having given birth to Jack as a teenager, was not revealed to him until 1974, when Time magazine researchers uncovered the secret while preparing a profile on the actor. Nicholson himself later admitted he never had the chance to ask his mother about it. Both June and Ethel had already passed away by the time he learned the truth. This revelation might have shaken another man to his core, but Nicholson accepted it with characteristic coolness. "It was a pretty dramatic event," he once said, "but it wasn't what I would call traumatizing. I was pretty well psychologically formed." In many ways, this early twist of fate shaped the man he would become, resilient, enigmatic, and accustomed to carrying secrets within himself. As a boy, Nicholson was mischievous, charming, and endlessly curious. He loved movies, but he also loved sports, especially baseball. School teachers described him as intelligent but distracted, someone with energy too restless to be confined within the walls of a classroom. By his teenage years, he was working in movie theaters, a foreshadowing of the career that awaited him. After high school, Nicholson set his sights westward. Hollywood was calling, though he could hardly imagine the heights he would one day reach. His first years in California were not glamorous. He worked behind the scenes at MGM's animation department, doing odd jobs. At one point, he even considered becoming an animator instead of an actor. But Nicholson's personality, his raw charisma, sharp humor and hunger for performance, was too big to stay in the background. His early life had given him grit. It had also given him the ability to reinvent himself, a trait that would serve him well as he stepped into the uncertain world of acting. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Jack Nicholson began the long climb toward stardom. Like many aspiring actors, he struggled through small parts and forgettable films, hoping for a break that always seemed just out of reach. His first credited role came in The Cry Baby Killer, 1958, a low-budget teen crime film that did little to advance his career but gave him valuable on-camera experience. Nicholson's early career was defined by his association with Roger Corman, the legendary director and producer known for his low-budget, high-energy productions. Nicholson appeared in several of Corman's films, including the cult classic Little Shop of Horrors, 1960, where he played a masochistic dental patient. These roles didn't make Nicholson a star, but they kept him working and allowed him to refine his craft. What stood out about Nicholson, even in these early years, was his presence. He had a face that seemed made for the camera, expressive, unpredictable, capable of shifting in an instant from warmth to menace. Casting directors may not have always known what to do with him, but audiences couldn't forget him once they saw him. Throughout the 1960s, Nicholson juggled acting with writing. He penned screenplays, including the counterculture film The Trip, 1967, directed by Corman and starring Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper. These connections would prove pivotal, linking Nicholson to a new wave of filmmakers who were challenging Hollywood norms. But fame still eluded him. For more than a decade, Nicholson was a working actor, respected, persistent, but far from a household name. He later reflected on those years with gratitude rather than bitterness, saying that the long struggle prepared him for the whirlwind of fame that would eventually come. And that whirlwind came in the form of a motorcycle movie that would change American cinema forever. In 1969, Jack Nicholson's life transformed overnight. Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda, both symbols of the countercultural revolution, were making a film called Easy Rider. It was a low-budget project about two bikers traveling across America, exploring freedom, rebellion, and the disillusionment of the 1960s. Nicholson was offered the role of George Hansen, an alcoholic lawyer who befriends the bikers on their journey. Nicholson was not the first choice for the role, but fate intervened. His performance as Hansen was magnetic, humorous, tragic, and utterly unforgettable. With his southern drawl and drunken charm, Nicholson stole every scene he was in. One particular moment, where Hansen delivers a monologue about freedom while sitting around a campfire, resonated deeply with audiences. The film became a cultural phenomenon, grossing more than $60 million on a budget of less than $400,000. More importantly, it made Nicholson a star. For his performance, he received his first Academy Award nomination, and suddenly Hollywood saw him not as a quirky supporting actor, but as a leading man. Easy Rider marked the beginning of the new Hollywood era, where actors like Nicholson, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Dustin Hoffman brought realism and intensity to the screen. Nicholson was at the forefront of this movement. His career, once uncertain, was now unstoppable. In the years that followed, Nicholson would take on roles that solidified his reputation as one of the greatest actors of his generation. But it was Easy Rider that opened the door, a door through which Jack Nicholson would stride confidently, forever changing the face of American cinema. The 1970s were a revolutionary period in Hollywood. The old studio system had crumbled, and in its place emerged a wave of filmmakers and actors eager to challenge convention, to tell stories that reflected the turbulence of the era. At the center of this creative explosion stood Jack Nicholson, a man who seemed born for the moment. After Easy Rider, Nicholson was in demand. But unlike many rising stars who simply took whatever roles came their way, Nicholson chose carefully. He gravitated toward characters who were outsiders, rebels, men on the edge of society, perhaps because in many ways, Nicholson saw himself the same way. In Five Easy Pieces, 1970, Nicholson played Bobby Dupuy, a former piano prodigy turned oil rig worker, drifting through life with a sense of disconnection. The film captured the restless spirit of a generation questioning authority, tradition, and purpose. Nicholson's performance, subtle yet deeply moving, earned him another Academy Award nomination. One scene in particular, where Bobby futilely argues with a waitress about ordering toast, became a cultural touchstone, symbolizing both rebellion and frustration with a rigid system. By the mid-1970s, Nicholson was no longer just a star, he was a symbol of the new Hollywood. He embodied an era where movies were darker, edgier, and more willing to confront the uncomfortable truths of society. The decade belonged to him, and yet his greatest triumph was still to come. In 1975, Jack Nicholson starred in a film that would forever define his career, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Based on Ken Kesey's novel, the film told the story of Randall Patrick McMurphy, a man who feigns insanity to avoid prison and ends up clashing with the oppressive nurse Ratched in a mental institution. Nicholson's McMurphy was electric, rebellious, charming, infuriating, and heartbreakingly human. He captured the essence of a man who refused to be broken by the system, even as it tried to crush him. His chemistry with the cast, particularly Louise Fletcher's chilling nurse Ratched, elevated the film into something transcendent. The production itself was challenging. Director Milos Forman demanded authenticity, often filming in an actual psychiatric hospital with real patients. Nicholson thrived in this environment, immersing himself fully in the role. The result was one of the most iconic performances in film history. When the film was released, it became both a critical and commercial triumph. It swept the 1976 Academy Awards, winning all 5 major categories: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay. Nicholson's win for Best Actor solidified his place among Hollywood's greatest. The impact of Cuckoo's Nest went far beyond awards. It tapped into a larger cultural moment, speaking to audiences who felt disillusioned with authority and institutions. McMurphy became a symbol of resistance, of individuality against conformity. For Nicholson, the role was more than just a career milestone, it was a legacy. Even today, decades later, Randall McMurphy is considered one of the greatest characters ever put to screen, and Nicholson's performance is studied, imitated, and celebrated by actors worldwide. With Cuckoo's Nest, Nicholson had done it. He wasn't just one of the greats of his generation, he was one of the greats of all time. By the late 1980s, Jack Nicholson was already an acting legend, but in 1989 he took on a role that would introduce him to an entirely new generation of fans, the Joker in Tim Burton's Batman. At a time when superhero films were still considered risky, Nicholson's casting brought instant credibility to the project. Warner Brothers knew that Nicholson's involvement meant audiences would take the film seriously, and Nicholson himself knew the character was more than just comic book fluff. it was an opportunity to unleash his theatrical brilliance on a grand scale. Nicholson negotiated one of the most lucrative deals in Hollywood history. Not only did he earn a massive $6 million upfront, unheard of at the time, but he also secured a percentage of the film's box office and merchandising profits. Over time, Nicholson's Joker role reportedly earned him more than $50 million, making it one of the most profitable performances ever. But the paycheck, while legendary, was only part of the story. Nicholson's Joker was unforgettable. He played the character as a mix of menace and madness, gleefully dancing between comedy and horror. With his painted white face, wide grin, and maniacal laugh, Nicholson redefined what a comic book villain could be. He was terrifying, yet magnetic, stealing every scene from Batman himself. The film was a global phenomenon, grossing more than $400 million and proving that comic book movies could be both commercially and artistically successful. Nicholson's Joker became a pop culture icon, influencing future portrayals by Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix while still standing as a unique, definitive version of the character. In the 1980s, Nicholson had already cemented himself as an artist, but Batman made him something else, a larger-than-life cultural figure. He was no longer just the actor's actor. He was a Hollywood superstar recognized by every corner of the world. As the 1990s began, Nicholson was no longer the rebellious up-and-comer of the 1970s, nor the commercial powerhouse of the 1980s. He had become something more rare, a respected veteran who could still command box office success while delivering performances of extraordinary depth. One of his most famous roles of the decade came in A Few Good Men, 1992. Playing Colonel Nathan R. Jessup, Nicholson embodied the arrogance and authority of a powerful military officer. His courtroom confrontation with Tom Cruise culminated in the now legendary line, "You can't handle the truth." Delivered with explosive energy, the moment became one of the most quoted in film history, and Nicholson's performance, though only appearing in a handful of scenes, dominated the film. Nicholson continued to balance heavy dramas with quirky projects. In Hoffa, 1992, he transformed into the labor leader Jimmy Hoffa, disappearing completely into the role. In Tim Burton's Mars Attacks, 1996, Nicholson leaned into absurd comedy, playing dual roles with relish. Few actors of his stature would take such risks, but Nicholson thrived on unpredictability. Off-screen, Nicholson's personal life in the 1990s was as colorful as his career. Known for his love of women, parties, and basketball games, Nicholson maintained his reputation as Hollywood's ultimate playboy. He fathered several children with different partners, yet remained a devoted father figure, often seen with his kids at events. To his friends and peers, Nicholson was the life of the party, yet he also carried himself with wisdom and grace, evolving into a kind of elder statesman of Hollywood. The 1990s were a decade of consolidation for Nicholson. He was no longer chasing stardom, he had it. He was no longer proving himself, he had nothing left to prove. Instead, he was enjoying his status, choosing roles that challenged him, amused him, or simply allowed him to have fun. In 1997, Nicholson took on a role that once again showcased his unparalleled range, Melvin Udall in James L. Brooks's romantic comedy drama, As Good as It Gets. Melvin was a cranky, obsessive-compulsive novelist who alienated everyone around him with his abrasive personality, until unexpected friendships and romance begin to thaw his heart. Nicholson approached the role with honesty and fearlessness. He didn't soften Melvin's edges, he made him as difficult, rude, and awkward as the script required. Yet, beneath the cruelty, Nicholson revealed vulnerability, loneliness, and the desperate desire for connection. It was a masterclass in layered performance, the kind only Nicholson could deliver. His chemistry with Helen Hunt, who played waitress Carol Connolly, was a revelation. The dynamic between Nicholson's sharp-tongued Melvin and Hunt's compassionate Carol carried the film, balancing harsh humor with tenderness. The film was both a critical and commercial success, grossing over $300 million worldwide. Nicholson won the Academy Award for Best Actor, his third Oscar, cementing his status as one of the greatest actors in history. At the age of 60, he had not only maintained relevance but reached new artistic heights. For audiences, Melvin Udall was proof that Nicholson could still surprise them. He wasn't just the rebellious McMurphy or the terrifying Torrance. He could be heartbreakingly human, showing fragility and redemption in a way that touched millions. The 2000s saw Nicholson continue to deliver memorable performances, showing that age did nothing to dull his talent. In About Schmidt, 2002, Nicholson played Warren Schmidt, a recently retired insurance man grappling with loneliness and purposelessness after the death of his wife. Stripped of his trademark charm and bravado, Nicholson gave a quietly devastating performance that earned him yet another Oscar nomination. In Something's Gotta Give, 2003, he returned to comedy, playing a wealthy bachelor who unexpectedly falls for a woman his own age, played by Diane Keaton. The film was a hit, and Nicholson's performance resonated with audiences because it felt almost autobiographical, a reflection of his real-life reputation as a ladies' man finally reckoning with aging. Then came The Departed, 2006, directed by Martin Scorsese. Nicholson played mob boss Frank Costello, a role he imbued with menace, charisma, and unpredictability. His performance was chilling, blending humor with violence in a way only he could. The film won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Nicholson's presence was a key ingredient in its success. Throughout the 2000s, Nicholson proved his versatility again and again. Whether playing broken men, romantic leads, or ruthless villains, he showed that even in his 60s and 70s, he could dominate the screen. His iconic smile, sharp delivery, and ability to command attention remained intact. By the end of the decade, Hollywood wasn't just celebrating Jack Nicholson the actor, it was celebrating Jack Nicholson the legend. With 3 Oscars, countless nominations, and a career spanning nearly 5 decades, he was recognized as one of the greatest living actors, a man whose name alone could sell a movie. For most of his career, Jack Nicholson was one of Hollywood's most visible stars. Whether on the big screen at award shows, or sitting courtside at Los Angeles Lakers games, his presence was constant, magnetic, and reassuring. But by the mid-2010s, something changed. Nicholson began to step back, both from acting and from public life. His last major role was in How Do You Know, 2010, a romantic comedy directed by James L. Brooks. Though Nicholson was still capable of carrying a film, the movie's lukewarm reception seemed to mark the end of an era. Offers continued to come in, but Nicholson quietly turned them down. By 2013, rumors began to circulate that he was retiring from acting. Whispers grew louder in the press, with speculation that Nicholson was experiencing memory loss, making it difficult for him to memorize lines. Nicholson himself never made a formal announcement of retirement. True to form, he kept the mystery alive. But his absence from the screen spoke louder than words. Occasionally, he would appear in public, most notably at Lakers games. Nicholson had been a fixture at courtside since the 1970s, his sunglasses and wide grin as iconic as any Hollywood red carpet. But as the years went by, even these appearances became rarer. Fans noticed, and concern grew. Was Jack Nicholson, the eternal rebel, the face of American cinema, fading away before our eyes? For those who had grown up with his films, his retreat from Hollywood felt like the end of an era. The man who had given everything to cinema now seemed to be keeping the rest of his life private. And perhaps, after decades of living so publicly, he had earned that right. Today, at 88 years old, Jack Nicholson lives a quiet life in his Los Angeles home on Mulholland Drive, a property he has owned for decades. Once known for his endless energy and constant presence in Hollywood circles, Nicholson now prefers solitude, spending time with family and a close circle of friends. Reports suggest that his health has declined in recent years. While there is no official confirmation, insiders have hinted at memory issues and limited mobility. It is said that Nicholson no longer travels far from home, and his outings are few and far between. For fans who remember him as the larger-than-life figure who dominated screens and arenas, these updates are heartbreaking. Still, those close to Nicholson say he is content. He spends his days watching movies, keeping up with sports, and enjoying the company of his children and grandchildren. He is no longer the party-going playboy of the past, but a man at peace with his legacy. In a sense, Nicholson's retreat mirrors the arc of many great artists. After giving so much of himself to the world, he now keeps what remains for those closest to him. For fans, it is bittersweet. They want to see him, hear him, feel his energy again. But they also understand that at 88, Jack Nicholson has earned his rest. To speak of Jack Nicholson's legacy is to speak of cinema itself. Few actors have shaped film the way he has. With over 60 films across 6 decades, Nicholson redefined what it meant to be a movie star. He wasn't conventionally handsome, nor did he fit the mold of Hollywood's traditional leading man. Yet his charisma, talent, and fearlessness made him magnetic. Nicholson's influence on actors is immeasurable. From Leonardo DiCaprio to Christian Bale, from Sean Penn to Joaquin Phoenix, generations of performers cite Nicholson as inspiration. His approach, a mix of instinct, improvisation, and emotional rawness, became known as the Nicholson method. He could make you laugh in one moment, terrify you in the next, and break your heart in between. Beyond his craft, Nicholson embodied rebellion. He was unpredictable, larger than life, and utterly authentic. He showed audiences that a movie star didn't have to be polished or safe. He could be dangerous, funny, complicated, even flawed. That authenticity made him real, and in being real, he became unforgettable. Jack Nicholson's career is inseparable from the highest honors in cinema. With 3 Academy Awards and 12 nominations, he stands among the most decorated actors in film history. His wins came for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975, Terms of Endearment, 1983, and As Good as It Gets, 1997, spanning over 2 decades, proof of both his longevity and unmatched skill. The Academy was not alone in recognizing him. Nicholson also earned Golden Globes, BAFTAs, Screen Actors Guild Awards, and a Kennedy Center honor, each accolade confirming what audiences already knew: he was a once-in-a-generation talent. In 1994, the American Film Institute honored him with the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, cementing his place alongside legends such as Alfred Hitchcock and Bette Davis. Critics often remarked that Nicholson didn't just act in films, he redefined what an actor could be. His name is permanently etched in the history of cinema, mentioned in the same breath as Marlon Brando, Humphrey Bogart, and Robert De Niro. For many, Nicholson remains the very face of American film, fearless, unpredictable, and unforgettable. Yet even the brightest stars fade with time. As Nicholson aged, fans witnessed a slow, heartbreaking retreat from the spotlight. Gone were the days of his mischievous grin on late-night talk shows or his animated presence at Lakers games. By the late 2010s, Nicholson's public appearances dwindled. He was rarely photographed, and when he was, the images sparked concern. Reports surfaced about declining health, possible memory loss, and the toll of age on a man who once embodied eternal youth and rebellion. Friends and colleagues spoke with tenderness about him. Some, like Michael Caine, expressed sadness at Nicholson's disappearance from the big screen but emphasized his right to enjoy privacy. Others simply cherished the body of work he left behind, recognizing that even if Nicholson never performed again, he had already given the world more than enough. For fans, the decline of a legend was bittersweet. They wanted him back, yet they also understood that their icon had reached a new chapter in life, one where peace mattered more than applause. What makes Jack Nicholson timeless is not just his awards but the immortality of his work. Films like Chinatown remain essential viewing for students of film noir. The Shining, with its terrifying intensity, continues to haunt audiences, referenced endlessly in pop culture. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest stands as one of the greatest explorations of freedom and defiance ever captured on screen. Nicholson's influence extends far beyond traditional cinema. His roles have inspired memes, GIFs, and endless references in television, music, and social media. His maniacal smile, his devilish eyebrows, his booming laugh, all have become symbols of rebellion and authenticity. Actors today still study his performances, hoping to capture even a fraction of the instinctive brilliance he brought to every role. Nicholson didn't just entertain, he reshaped the cultural landscape. His characters became part of our shared imagination, alive long after the credits rolled. When Nicholson faded from the public eye, fans around the world filled the void with love. Tributes poured in across social media, with countless clips, quotes, and movie montages celebrating his work. Younger audiences discovered him through streaming platforms, marveling at how his films felt as relevant now as when they first premiered. Even his absence became a source of devotion. Fans continued to reserve seats at Lakers games with signs that read, "We miss you, Jack." Others created online communities dedicated to preserving his legacy. For many, Nicholson represented not just an actor but a companion through life's milestones. His characters made them laugh when they needed joy, cry when they needed catharsis, and reflect when they needed truth. This emotional connection explains why people grow teary-eyed when they hear about Nicholson's reclusive life at 88. To them, he isn't just a celebrity. He's family, a constant presence who shaped their understanding of movies, emotions, and even themselves. And so we arrive at the question, what happened to Jack Nicholson at 88? Jack Nicholson, the rebel, the joker, the madman, the genius, has stepped away from the stage he once ruled. His health may be fragile, his appearances rare, his voice quieter. But he remains with us, living privately, surrounded by family and memories. What makes his story so emotional is not just his retreat from the public eye but what it symbolizes. We are witnessing the passage of time, the fading of an era, and the transformation of a legend into a man who simply wishes for peace. Yet Nicholson's spirit endures. His films remain alive, his influence undeniable, his legacy unshakable. He may no longer stand before the camera, but on screen, he is forever young, forever mischievous, forever Jack. That is what happened to Jack Nicholson at 88. He lived, he gave, and now he rests. And though the world may cry at the thought of losing him to time, they can also smile, knowing that his legend will never fade. Because Jack Nicholson is more than an actor. He is a chapter of cinema itself, one that will be read, watched, and cherished for generations to come. Jack Nicholson's journey is one that moves us all, from his meteoric rise in Hollywood to his quiet retreat at 88. His story reminds us of the fragility of time, the power of art, and the legacy of a man who gave his soul to cinema. If Jack Nicholson's life and legacy touched you, we invite you to stay connected with us. By liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and turning on notifications, you'll never miss our deep dives into the lives of the legends who shaped our world.